There is a quiet kind of pain that rarely finds words. It does not announce itself loudly, and it does not demand attention. It sits inside you, unanswered, lingering in moments when you replay conversations in your mind and still cannot find what you did wrong. You are sincere in your intentions. You try to act with fairness. You speak carefully, and when silence feels wiser, you choose silence. Yet somehow, you notice distance forming around you. Faces change. Warmth fades. People begin to treat you as if you carry something unsettling, even though you have offered nothing but goodwill. You ask yourself, how did this happen? How can someone who means no harm still provoke discomfort? How can kindness be met with coldness? Perhaps you've experienced it at work. You do your part honestly without cutting corners or playing games, and yet you feel subtly excluded. Conversations stop when you enter the room. Your words are misunderstood or worse, ignored. Or maybe it happens within family where your calm presence is mistaken for pride, your restraint for distance. You find yourself being judged for what you did not say, blamed for what you did not intend. And the most unsettling part is this. You search inward sincerely, and still you cannot find the wrongdoing they seem to see so clearly. This is not the loud pain of betrayal. It is the quiet confusion of being misread. You begin to wonder if goodness itself has a cost, not because you expect reward for it, but because you notice something unsettling. The more you try to live honestly, the more resistance seems to appear around you. It feels as though your presence alone disturbs something unseen. Have you ever felt that? That sense of being out of place without choosing to stand apart. That subtle tension, as if your way of being quietly unsettles others. Most people assume that harmony comes from blending in, from agreeing, from becoming less visible. Yet even when you do not seek attention, even when you do not impose yourself, something about you feels too clear for some environments. You are not loud, you are not confrontational, and yet your sincerity seems to echo. This is where many begin to doubt themselves. Am I being naive? Should I be different? Is my silence being misread? Ibn Arabi reminds us that not all wounds are caused by wrongdoing. Some arise from collision, from the meeting of inner worlds that do not speak the same language. He taught that hearts do not receive reality in the same way. What feels gentle to one may feel threatening to another. What feels calm to you may feel exposing to someone who is used to noise. But at this stage, you may not yet see that. All you feel is the weight of being misunderstood. You may notice how people begin to project onto you. They assume intentions you never carried. They attribute motives you never had. And when you try to clarify, it often makes things worse. Words feel insufficient. Explanations feel like defenses, and defenses feel unnecessary when your heart knows it acted sincerely. So you pull back, not out of arrogance but out of exhaustion. There is something deeply human about wanting to be seen as you are, not praised, not admired, simply understood. And when that understanding does not come, even from those you hoped would recognize your sincerity, it creates a quiet loneliness, a sense of standing in a room full of people and still feeling unseen. Yet Ibn Arabi would say that this moment is not meaningless, that this confusion is not random, that the pain of being misunderstood often signals the beginning of a deeper awareness, one that does not revolve around fixing others' perceptions, but around understanding the nature of perception itself. Because before we can understand why people react to goodness with resistance, we must first sit honestly with the experience of being rejected without reason, without blame, without defensiveness. Only then does the deeper truth begin to reveal itself. And that truth is not about who you are. It is about what your presence awakens in others. In the next part, we will step into Ibn Arabi's insight and begin to see why hearts do not all see the same world, even when they are standing in the same room. When confusion lingers long enough, it begins to ask for meaning, not explanation, not justification, but understanding. Ibn Arabi approached human experience from this exact place. He did not begin with behavior or appearances. He began with the heart. He taught that reality is not received equally by all people. Two individuals can stand in the same moment, hear the same words, witness the same action, and walk away with entirely different impressions. Not because one is right and the other is wrong, but because the heart through which reality passes is not the same. Ibn Arabi said that the voice of truth is only heard by hearts open to truth. This does not mean that truth changes. It means the capacity to receive it does. Think of how this plays out in everyday life. You speak calmly with no hidden intention, yet someone hears accusation. You act with restraint and another perceives coldness. You remain silent and they sense judgment. The action is the same. The interpretation is not. Why? Because hearts do not see the world directly. They see it filtered through their own inner state. Ibn Arabi understood the heart as a lens. Whatever fills that lens shapes what is perceived. A heart heavy with insecurity does not meet clarity with relief. It meets it with discomfort. A heart accustomed to competition does not recognize sincerity. It searches for motive. And a heart that avoids its own inner contradictions often reacts strongly to those who unknowingly highlight them. This is not cruelty, it is limitation. When you enter a space with sincerity, you do not bring only your words or actions. You bring your inner alignment, and that alignment quietly interacts with the inner worlds of others. Some feel at ease in it. Others feel unsettled, as if something inside them has been disturbed without warning. Have you ever noticed how some people feel immediately comfortable around you, while others become distant for reasons they cannot explain? How the same presence that brings calm to one person creates tension in another. This is the difference Ibn Arabi points to. The heart receives what it is capable of receiving. He taught that people often react not to what is, but to what their heart is ready to see. And when a heart is not ready to face sincerity, it does not experience it as gentle. It experiences it as exposure. This is why misunderstandings can feel so irrational. You are not being judged for your actions alone, but for the inner echo those actions create in someone else. Your calm reveals their unrest. Your honesty touches their unresolved guilt. Your consistency highlights their inner conflict. Not intentionally, not deliberately, simply by being. From this perspective, rejection is no longer a verdict on your worth. It becomes a sign of contrast, a meeting of two inner worlds that do not resonate in the same way. Ibn Arabi did not encourage people to force understanding. He warned against it. He understood that when a heart is closed, explanation does not open it. It only hardens resistance. Truth offered to a closed heart does not feel like guidance, it feels like pressure. That is why you may notice that the more sincerely you try to clarify yourself, the less you are understood. The issue was never the clarity of your words. It was the readiness of the heart receiving them. This understanding changes how you carry yourself. It shifts the question from, "Why do they dislike me?" to, "What is my presence awakening in them?" And more importantly, is it my responsibility to manage what they are not ready to face? Ibn Arabi would say no. Your role is not to adjust your sincerity to fit someone else's inner limitations, nor is it to harden yourself in response to misunderstanding. It is to remain aligned with your own heart, knowing that not every heart you encounter can receive what you carry. Some will feel seen by you. Others will feel exposed. And exposure for an unprepared heart feels like threat. This is where the deeper layer begins. Because once you understand that hearts see different worlds, you can begin to understand why goodness itself sometimes provokes resistance, not because it is wrong, but because it reveals. In the next section, we will explore this revelation more closely, how sincerity becomes a mirror, and why some people turn away not from you, but from what they see reflected within themselves. There is a moment when sincerity stops being invisible. not because you announce it, but because it begins to reflect. Ibn Arabi described the heart as a mirror, and this image explains much of what remains confusing in human relationships. A mirror does not accuse. It does not speak. It simply shows what stands before it. When you move through life with a quiet steadiness, without exaggeration, without manipulation, without performance, you become reflective by nature. Your way of being reveals contrast, and for some, that contrast is uncomfortable. You may not correct others. You may not criticize. You may not compete. Yet something about your presence unsettles them. Why? Because in front of a clear mirror, whatever is unresolved becomes visible. A person who doubts their own integrity may feel uneasy around someone who acts without calculation. A person who hides behind noise may feel disturbed by silence. A person who compromises inwardly may feel exposed by someone who does not. This is not about moral superiority. Ibn Arabi was careful about this. He did not say that the mirror is better than what it reflects. He said that the mirror simply shows what is there, and not every heart is ready to see itself clearly. Think about how this appears in everyday life. You enter a room and say very little, yet the atmosphere changes. A comment meant as humor lands awkwardly around you, even though you said nothing. Someone becomes defensive in your presence, even though you made no accusation. You sense tension, but you did not create it. Your presence becomes a quiet question they did not want to answer. Have you ever felt that? That strange shift in energy that happens without words. That discomfort that appears even when you remain gentle. Ibn Arabi taught that the heart reflects truth naturally. It does not choose what to show. And when a heart encounters something it cannot reconcile within itself, it often reacts outwardly. This is where misunderstanding turns into resistance. Instead of turning inward and asking, "Why does this disturb me?" many choose the easier path. They project, they label, they create narratives that allow them to avoid looking at themselves. And so you become distant, arrogant, or too serious, even though none of these were ever your intentions. These labels are not about you, they are shields. A mirror that reveals inner conflict is uncomfortable to stand before. And so, rather than adjusting themselves, people often turn away from the mirror. Or worse, they try to break it. This is why some people do not simply misunderstand you, they push against you. They may speak about you behind your back. They may subtly undermine you. They may treat your silence as judgment and your restraint as rejection. But in truth, nothing has changed in you. Ibn Arabi said that a person who cannot face their own truth will resist the one who carries it. Not because that person intends to carry truth, but because truth is what naturally appears in their presence. Even silence can become revealing. Silence leaves space, and space invites reflection. For a heart that avoids reflection, space feels threatening. So your quietness is misread as disapproval. Your calm is mistaken for coldness. Your steadiness is seen as distance. You did not raise a mirror deliberately. You simply lived in alignment. This is the subtle burden of sincerity. It does not shout. It does not demand recognition. Yet it illuminates, and illumination is not always welcome. It is important to understand this, because without this clarity you may begin to shrink yourself. You may soften your truth, dull your presence, or explain yourself unnecessarily, hoping to ease the discomfort of others. But Ibn Arabi warned against this. He did not advise people to dim their light to preserve harmony. He advised them to understand the nature of hearts. Some hearts feel relief when they see themselves clearly. Others feel pain, and pain often seeks a target. So if you find that certain people react strongly to you without reason, pause before turning that reaction inward. Ask yourself instead, what might my presence be reflecting that they are not ready to see? This understanding does not create distance. It creates compassion without self-erasure. It allows you to remain kind without becoming smaller. It allows you to stay present without becoming responsible for another person's inner struggle. Because the mirror does not need to explain itself. It simply remains. In the next part, we will look more closely at why goodness itself, when it is quiet and sincere, often brings discomfort before it brings peace. There is a comforting belief many people grow up with that goodness naturally creates harmony, that if you are kind, patient, and sincere, the world will soften in response. And sometimes this does happen. But Ibn Arabi observed something deeper. Goodness does not always bring peace first. Often it brings discomfort. This is not because goodness is flawed. It is because truth reveals before it heals. When someone lives with inner compromise, they become accustomed to it. Over time, that compromise feels normal. It becomes familiar, predictable, and safe. But when goodness enters such a space, quiet, unannounced, and without expectation, it disrupts that familiarity. It reminds the heart of something it once knew but has long avoided. Goodness does not argue. It does not accuse. Yet it reveals. Ibn Arabi taught that light does not negotiate with darkness. It simply appears, and in appearing, it changes the space. For some, that change feels like relief. For others, it feels like exposure. Think of how this plays out in ordinary moments. A calm presence in a tense room, an honest word spoken without edge, a refusal to participate in gossip. These are small things, yet they can shift the emotional atmosphere entirely. And when an atmosphere shifts, those who depend on it may feel unsettled. You may notice that people become uncomfortable around you not when you confront them, but when you don't. When you do not mirror their tone. When you do not play along. When you choose restraint over reaction. This is because goodness creates contrast, and contrast invites awareness. For a heart that is not ready to be aware, discomfort follows. Ibn Arabi understood that many people prefer familiarity over truth. Even when familiarity is limiting, it feels safe. Goodness challenges that safety quietly. It introduces a different rhythm, one that does not rely on manipulation, competition, or constant affirmation. And this is where resistance begins. Instead of asking, "Why does this unsettle me?" people often ask, "What is wrong with them?" It is easier to question the source of discomfort than to question the discomfort itself. And so, the person who carries goodness becomes the problem. This is why sincerity is sometimes met with suspicion, why kindness is questioned for hidden motives, why restraint is interpreted as judgment. You may have felt this in subtle ways. A change in how people speak to you, a shift in tone, a sense that you are no longer fully welcomed, even though nothing outward has changed. It can be tempting to respond by softening yourself further, to explain, to reassure, to prove that you mean no harm. But Ibn Arabi would caution against this. When discomfort arises from inner conflict, reassurance does not resolve it. It only postpones it. Goodness cannot be negotiated into acceptability. This does not mean that you become rigid or distant. It means you understand that not every discomfort needs to be resolved by you. Some discomfort is necessary. It is the beginning of awareness. Ibn Arabi saw this as part of divine wisdom. The world is not arranged to keep every heart comfortable. It is arranged to invite growth, and growth rarely begins in ease. That is why goodness can feel disruptive. It interrupts patterns, it exposes habits, it invites a reckoning with self. And for those who are not ready, that invitation feels like pressure. This understanding changes how you interpret rejection. Instead of seeing it as failure, you begin to see it as friction created by difference. Not moral difference, but inner readiness. Two rhythms moving out of sync. You are not required to create peace by abandoning your alignment. Peace that demands self-erasure is not peace. It is silence imposed by fear of conflict. Ibn Arabi did not call for confrontation. He called for clarity, clarity of intention, clarity of presence, clarity of heart. When goodness unsettles others, it is not an invitation to withdraw, nor to harden. It is an invitation to understand the nature of transformation, that before peace settles, something must be disturbed. And sometimes, what is disturbed is not a situation, but a heart. In the next section, we will explore why this disturbance often leads to loneliness, and why Ibn Arabi did not see loneliness as a punishment, but as a form of protection. When goodness unsettles, distance often follows. Conversations grow shorter. Invitations become fewer. You notice that your presence, once tolerated or even welcomed, is now met with quiet avoidance. This is usually the point where loneliness enters, not suddenly, but gradually, like a door closing without sound. Loneliness is often misunderstood. It is commonly seen as rejection, as evidence that something has gone wrong. But Ibn Arabi approached loneliness differently. He saw it not as abandonment, but as a form of protection, one that preserves the integrity of the heart. He warned against wasting oneself in places where the heart is not seen, not because others are unworthy, but because continual misunderstanding erodes inner clarity. When you are repeatedly asked to explain your sincerity, justify your restraint, or dilute your truth to maintain comfort, something within you begins to thin. Loneliness, in this sense, is not imposed. It is a natural withdrawal of the soul from spaces where it cannot breathe. Think of how this appears in real life. You stop forcing conversations that feel heavy. You no longer explain yourself to those who have already decided who you are. You choose fewer words, fewer connections, fewer attachments, not out of bitterness but out of care. This kind of solitude is quiet. It does not announce itself as isolation. It feels more like standing still while others move away. Ibn Arabi understood that crowds have their own gravity. They pull towards sameness. They reward those who blend, who echo familiar patterns, who speak the language of expectation. When you step out of that rhythm, by remaining sincere, restrained, or inwardly aligned, you begin to move against that pull. And movement against the current creates space. That space can feel empty at first. The absence of noise can be unsettling. You may wonder if you are becoming distant, cold, or detached. But Ibn Arabi would say that this quiet is not emptiness. It is clarity. In solitude, the heart becomes audible. Crowds often blur inner perception. In constant interaction, we adjust, adapt, and compromise without noticing. Solitude removes that pressure. It allows you to hear your own intention without interference, to notice when you are acting from truth and when you are reacting from fear. This is why loneliness often follows sincerity, not because sincerity is punished, but because it refines the spaces you can inhabit. It is important to understand this, because without this perspective, loneliness can harden into resentment. You may begin to believe that goodness is a burden, that sincerity leads only to isolation. But Ibn Arabi did not see it this way. He saw solitude as a necessary companion on the path of truth. Not permanent, not absolute, but essential. There are truths that cannot survive constant exposure. There are intentions that weaken when they are continually questioned. Loneliness protects these fragile beginnings. It shelters what is still forming. This does not mean cutting yourself off from the world. It means becoming selective about where you place your heart, about which spaces you allow to shape you. Ibn Arabi reminded seekers that not every environment is meant to receive every truth, and forcing yourself to belong where you are not seen does not create connection. It creates erosion. Have you ever noticed how some forms of loneliness feel heavy while others feel strangely peaceful? One drains you, the other steadies you. The difference is not the absence of people, but the presence of alignment. Loneliness that protects does not demand withdrawal from humanity. It invites intimacy with essence. It teaches you to remain whole even when unseen. And from this place something shifts. When you no longer chase understanding, you begin to carry yourself differently, less defensive, less reactive, more grounded. This is where loneliness becomes strength, not because it isolates you, but because it anchors you. In the next section, we will explore how intention, rather than appearance, becomes the true measure of goodness, and why those who give without calculation are so often misunderstood. There is a subtle difference between what is seen and what is intended. Most misunderstandings are born in that gap. Ibn Arabi placed great importance on intention, not as an abstract idea, but as the true weight behind every action. What the heart leans toward, he taught, matters more than what the eyes can observe. In everyday life, people learn to read behavior quickly. They interpret tone, gesture, and outcome. But intention lives beneath all of this. It cannot be measured easily, and it cannot be proven. It can only be felt, and feeling requires openness. This is why sincere people are so often misread. When you act without calculation, without expectation of return, your actions do not fit the familiar patterns people rely on. Many are accustomed to exchange. Help is given for recognition. Kindness is offered with strings attached. Words are shaped to gain advantage. When someone acts outside of this system, it creates uncertainty. People begin to search for motive. You may offer support quietly, and someone wonders what you want in return. You may step back from attention, and someone assumes you think yourself above it. You may choose restraint, and someone interprets it as indifference. The action is simple, the interpretation is not. Ibn Arabi taught that intention is perceived only by hearts that are unclouded. When the heart is veiled by fear, comparison, or self-interest, it cannot recognize sincerity. It looks for patterns it understands, and when it does not find them, it fills the gap with suspicion. This is not a moral failure. It is a limitation of perception. Consider how often society rewards what is visible. Loud gestures are celebrated. Public acts are remembered. Quiet consistency is overlooked. Small, unseen acts rarely receive recognition, even though they often carry the greatest sincerity. You may have experienced this yourself. A moment when you helped someone without anyone noticing. A sacrifice made without acknowledgement. A word spoken at the right time that prevented harm, even though no one knew its impact. These moments matter, even if they remain unseen. Ibn Arabi said that the servant is measured by intention, not by how actions are interpreted, but by what the heart aimed toward. This understanding shifts the ground beneath you. It frees you from the constant need to be understood. When intention becomes your compass, misunderstanding loses its power. This does not mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop relying on their interpretation to validate your sincerity. You act because it is right, not because it will be recognized. And this, too, can unsettle people. A person who gives without calculation disrupts systems built on exchange. Their actions cannot be categorized easily. Others may feel uneasy because they do not know how to respond. Gratitude feels insufficient. Repayment feels unnecessary. And so confusion takes the place of appreciation. This confusion often turns into distance. You may notice that the more quietly you act, the less you are understood. Not because your actions are unclear, but because they do not announce themselves. They do not demand interpretation. Ibn Arabi would say that this is the price of sincerity in a world trained to measure value by visibility. Yet there is dignity in this path. When you act from intention rather than appearance, your sense of self becomes anchored. You no longer shift according to reaction. You no longer shrink or expand based on response. You begin to trust the direction of your heart. This trust does not make you rigid. It makes you steady. It allows you to remain open without becoming vulnerable to misinterpretation. It allows you to continue offering goodness without demanding that it be recognized. Because when intention is clear, misunderstanding cannot undo it. In the next section, we will explore how walking this path, quiet, sincere, and often unseen, shapes destiny itself, and how to remain gentle without becoming bitter along the way. There comes a moment, often quietly, when you realize that the path you are walking is not crowded. Not because you pushed others away, but because fewer people are willing to walk it with sincerity. This realization can be sobering. It can also be dangerous, because if misunderstood, it can harden into bitterness. Ibn Arabi was careful here. He spoke of rarity but never of superiority. Walking a different path does not make you above others. It makes you responsible for your inner state. When goodness is misunderstood repeatedly, a subtle temptation appears. You may feel the urge to withdraw emotionally, to close yourself off, to protect your heart by becoming distant, guarded, or indifferent. This is understandable. Pain naturally seeks armor. But armor, if worn too long, stiffens the heart. Ibn Arabi taught that sincerity must remain soft, even when it stands alone. The goal is not to survive misunderstanding by becoming hard, but by becoming rooted. Rooted in intention, rooted in awareness, rooted in patience. Have you ever noticed how bitterness often begins quietly, not as anger but as fatigue? As the sense that giving is pointless, that kindness is wasted, that silence is safer than openness. These thoughts feel protective, yet they slowly pull you away from your own essence. The rare path is not rare because it is hidden. It is rare because it asks for balance, to remain open without being naive, to remain kind without expecting return, to remain truthful without forcing understanding. This balance requires inner discipline. Ibn Arabi understood that destiny unfolds differently for those who walk with intention, not because they are favored, but because they are aligned. Their path is shaped by the choices they make when no one is watching, by the way they respond to misunderstanding, by whether they allow rejection to refine them or to harden them. You may have noticed this already. The more you remain patient, the less reactive you become. The less reactive you are, the less power misunderstanding holds. This does not mean it stops. It means it no longer defines you. The world is noisy. It reacts quickly. It judges based on fragments. Walking quietly within it requires steadiness. It requires you to resist the urge to explain yourself endlessly or to withdraw completely. Instead, you learn to stand. Standing does not mean confrontation. It means presence. It means continuing to act with integrity even when it is inconvenient, even when it goes unnoticed, even when it is misread. This is where the path becomes rare. Many begin with sincerity. Few remain with it when it stops being rewarding. Ibn Arabi would say that this is where destiny listens, not to words, but to consistency, not to claims, but to orientation of the heart. When you remain aligned despite misunderstanding, something subtle shifts within you. You no longer measure yourself by reaction. You no longer seek confirmation. You begin to trust your own clarity. And in that trust, bitterness loses its grip. This does not make the path easy. It makes it meaningful. You are not asked to endure quietly forever. You are asked to remain truthful without losing tenderness, to protect your heart without closing it, to walk forward without needing the crowd's approval. This is the quiet strength of the rare path, not isolation, not pride, but inner stability. In the next section, we will bring these threads together and explore how to live with quiet certainty in a noisy world, without withdrawing from life, and without needing to be understood. There is a point where understanding replaces struggle, not because the world changes, but because your relationship to it does. Ibn Arabi described this as a form of inner settling, a state where the heart no longer reacts to every echo around it. Quiet certainty does not announce itself. It does not argue, defend, or demand recognition. It simply holds steady. When you reach this place, misunderstanding still exists, but it no longer destabilizes you. You stop scanning faces for approval. You stop replaying conversations in search of clarity that may never come. Instead, you return to the one place that has always known your intention, your own heart. This is not indifference, it is grounding. In a noisy world, reactions come quickly. People respond to fragments, to impressions, to their own projections. Quiet certainty allows you to remain present without being pulled into these currents. You listen without absorbing. You speak without needing to convince. You remain open without becoming exposed. Ibn Arabi taught that when the heart knows its direction, the judgments of others lose their weight, not because they are wrong, but because they are incomplete. They reflect only what the other person is capable of seeing. This understanding brings relief. You no longer feel the urge to explain your silence or justify your restraint. You allow others to interpret as they will, knowing that interpretation does not alter intention. Everyday life begins to feel lighter. You choose your words carefully, not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. You give where it feels right. You step back where it feels necessary. You stop forcing harmony in spaces that require you to become smaller. Quiet certainty also changes how you view connection. You no longer seek to be understood by everyone. You recognize that true understanding is rare, and when it appears, it feels natural, effortless, unforced. This does not lead to withdrawal from life. It leads to discernment. You remain engaged but not entangled. You care, but you are not consumed by reaction. You remain sincere, but you are no longer dependent on reception. Ibn Arabi saw this state as a sign of alignment. When inner and outer actions move in the same direction, the heart rests. It is no longer torn between how it feels and how it is perceived. This resting does not mean passivity, it means stability. You may still be misunderstood, you may still be judged, but these no longer threaten your sense of self. You know where you stand, you know why you act, and that knowledge steadies you. Quiet certainty is not something you claim, it is something you inhabit. It shows in how you walk into a room without needing to be seen, in how you listen without preparing defense, in how you leave spaces that no longer align without bitterness. And perhaps most importantly, it shows in how you remain kind, not because it is rewarded, but because it is true. This is where the journey leads, not to approval, not to isolation, but to a grounded presence that does not depend on the noise of the world. In the final moments, we will step back gently and leave you with a question, not to answer aloud, but to carry with you as you move forward. Have you ever remained sincere, only to be misunderstood? Have you ever chosen silence and been judged for it? Or felt disliked without ever knowing why? If this reflection touched something in you, take a moment to sit with it. And if you feel comfortable, share your experience in the comments. Your words may help someone else who is walking a similar path. If you found value in this reflection, support the channel by liking the video, subscribing to Voice of Sufism, and turning on the bell so you don't miss future stories and insights. More reflections inspired by Ibn Arabi and Sufi wisdom are appearing on your screen now. Let them accompany you a little further on your journey. This is not an ending. It is simply another step inward. Thank you for being here.